Good afternoon, everyone. Hello, hello. What a fantastic looking room. It is jam-packed. If you're coming in, there's a few seats available over here on this side, so please do come in, take a seat. You're in for an absolute treat. I'm just delighted to see so many people turning up for Austrian Economics. You've made Austrian Economics cool again, guys. Congratulations. So, yes, yeah, why not? Why not? Very cool. So this next session will take us back to the intellectual roots of Bitcoin, long before the white paper, before the internet, even before the computers. The Austrian School of Economics laid the philosophical and mathematical groundwork for what many of us now recognize as the foundation of sound money. Ideas around time preference, individual action, and decentralized value that resonate perfectly with Bitcoin. To walk us through that history, we've got our finest 80 IQ mid-wit plebs. I'm sorry, I couldn't resist. We have the best and brightest minds in Bitcoin, some of the best writers, economists, authors. We have, of course, Saifedean Ammous, who is the economist, author, and Bitcoin educator, probably most famous still for the Bitcoin standard, although I know that fiat standard is trending more and more. We have Rahim. Was anyone here for Rahim's talk yesterday? Yes, yes, good, solid amount of hands. You know who he is. He's the CEO of DeedSats, of course. And we have Knut Svanholm, who is the author, educator, Bitcoin rock star. You know who he is. Moderating this discussion is Dusan Matuska, who is the Bitcoin educator, miner, and co-founder of Amity Age. Please put your hands together and welcome them to the stage this afternoon for the history of the Austrian School of Economics.
Join us closer, Saif. Don't go so far away. Don't be afraid of Rahim. Come on.
Oh, okay, sorry. I thought you were going to sit here. No worries. Let me just...
I mean, seeing these many people here, my historian teacher would sell a kidney to get this much of attention to talk about history. It's wonderful to have you guys here and discuss about a topic that's kind of close to us. I want to see you guys who was interested or who knew about Austrian economy before they got into Bitcoin. Raise your hand. Okay, maybe 30%. Lucky bastards. I mean, if I knew, I was studying economics and management for 5 years on school, never even once got Austrian economic mentioned. So I'm jealous of you guys that knew before Bitcoin. So today we have the legends here, and we're going to dive deep into how the history looked like. So guys, I would like to know from all of you, what was your kind of heureka or this aha moment in your life when you decided like, wow, this is the thing, I want to study it, I want to make this topic of my life journey. Knut, let's start with you.
Here I have to credit Saifedean, of course. Like you're the one who sent me deeper down this rabbit hole, and I'm eternally grateful that you did that. Thank you, Saif.
Thanks.
Same.
By the way, it's my 49th birthday today, and this is the best birthday present I could ever.
Oh, wow. Give it up for Knut.
I hope to celebrate the next one here in Lugano too. We can make a thing out of that, I think.
So Alessia, listen, the date has to be the same time of the year next year, okay? Please don't forget it.
I think it is because I think it has something to do with Paulo's birthday.
Oh, okay, it's collided.
That's
nice.
just a rumor.
Okay. So Knut, okay, so it started with reading the Bitcoin standard.
Yeah, well, I was aware of the ideas before that, and I had sort of touched on it, but like going deeper into Rothbard and Mises was Saifedean's. Saifedean was the gateway drug to that. I absolutely love the Bitcoin standard, and I wrote my first book on Bitcoin sovereignty through mathematics around the same time. They came out at the same time. I met you in Riga 2019.
Yes.
Bitcoin was around $10,000. So you were wearing those funny shoes where you can see the toes.
Still have them.
And yeah, I wrote my book without much knowledge about Austrian economics at the time, and I'm very glad that my ideas sort of mapped onto this whole way of seeing the world. So yeah, and here I am, and very happy.
Beautiful. I love when educators produce another educators and another educator. So it's spreading. The orange light is spreading. Love to hear that. Rahim, how was it in your case? When did you find out that this is your thing?
Totally different. It was very gradual. I consider myself an Austrian economist since the late 90s. I'm actually an Austrian, so it helped a bit. Not because Austrian economics was present in Austria, but the conspicuous absence of Austrian economics in Austria drew my attention when I learned about it in the US.
Like you're like, where is the school? Show me the school.
Exactly,
Where is it physically?
Yes. Exactly. I was looking for that. When I didn't find it, I found it, one. Well, I've also came pretty early to Bitcoin, and it just tells you that I'm very slow. So been in Austrian economics for a long time, and it was a gradual, very gradual process. The same with Bitcoin. It's a gradual learning experience. Where you figure out that the map of the world and the world somehow start to match, but it's a discovery process.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you for that. Saifedean, how it was in your case?
Well, first of all, let me just say, Knut, happy birthday, but it was also my birthday yesterday, and I'm 45th
Damn!
birthday.
Wow.
So we're both Scorpios.
Right back at you, bro.
And this
Anybody
is
else's birthdays today or yesterday? The statistics work.
Carmen.
Perfect. Give it up for you as well.
Yes.
I mean, Alessia, now you don't have any choice not to do it.
Yes.
Wow.
There's nothing like Austrian economics to celebrate birthdays, honestly. So my story, I would say, it started when I was doing my PhD at Columbia University in New York in between 2004 and 2009. Around 2007 is when I took my comprehensive exam, and I had always had this idea that, you know, by the time you finish reading all of these economics books, you're going to actually understand what's going on in economics. But I did the exam, I passed, and I still felt like an idiot. Nothing made sense. And then the global financial crisis happened around 2007, 2008. And around that time, you know, I started initially reading Karl Popper. He led me to Hayek. He was my gateway drug to Hayek. And then Hayek led me to the good stuff, Mises and Rothbard, the hard hitting stuff. And I was reading that around 2008, 2009, and I was living in New York, you know, and the world was falling apart outside my apartment. And I'm sitting there and reading this. And I would say, you know, I think the key aha moment, I'll never forget this. I was in my apartment in New York, and I was reading this paper called The Austrian Theory of Money by Murray Rothbard. It's a short paper, 20, 30 pages or so. And in that paper, there's a moment where he discusses the key concept, which is that you don't need the money supply to increase. And that what distinguishes the Austrian school from other schools of economics is that they focus on the idea that money supply doesn't need to increase. In fact, if we could theoretically invent a form of money whose supply was capped and fixed and nobody could increase it, it would be the best money. And that moment truly blew my mind because everything made sense. I'd always had intuitively understood this. I'd always understood that inflation was wrong. But to just have this confirmation that I'm not crazy, that somebody else out there, a grown-up who writes books and sells the books, has just flat out saying it, a fixed supply money would be better. That was the moment that I would say, you know, I became completely converted. And since then, I spent a lot of time asking a lot of economists, why does the central bank increase the money supply? Why don't they just say, all right, this is all the money that's there, knock yourself out, do whatever you want. The value of the money is going to go up in time, of course, because you're limiting the supply. Why would that be a bad thing? And it's amazing. If you really want to get a blue screen in the face of a fiat economist, if you want to get them to just crash and stop operating, if you want to deactivate a fiat economist, just ask him this question. Why should the money supply increase? Why can't we just stick to the current money supply and not increase it? And it's amazing. It's like, you remember that movie Ali G, when he does stupid stunts to people and then films their reaction? Same thing you could do with economists. You could have an amazing documentary. Just go walking up to economists and asking them, why can't we just not increase the money supply? And they're going to continue to get that question more and more, because now more and more students in their colleges and classes are beginning to ask that question, thankfully, thanks to Bitcoin.
Beautiful. I mean, let's write this question to our minds or notes, and let's ask it everywhere we can find. You already touched a couple of topics about the differences Austrian to the, let's say, regular Keynesian economists. But Rahim, let's go to the history with you. Why did the Austrian School of Economics emerged in the late 19th century, what they were advocating for and against with the current trend at the time?
I think it was a terrifyingly similar context to these days. It was a society in crisis, and it was a quite deep-running crisis. It wasn't evident when it started. So Karl Menger just was this very reasonable, very realist, down-to-earth person. He just figured out economics doesn't explain much of what's happening in the markets, so he wanted to study reality. And then he got gloomy and it was like, oh, things are going to shit. Oh my God. And then he saw that something was filling this vacuum of people losing trust in the experts of the time. It was all like, no one, who can you trust? Who knows better? Who's telling you how to live your life? Austria and Austria-Hungary, so that Central Europe was lately and belatedly modernizing, industrializing place. It was an impressive hub. Vienna was like the Singapore at the time, one of the 5 biggest cities in the world, with trade connections to the Middle East, to Africa, anywhere. So it was really a hub. But you have a society in crisis because a lot of trust is abused by wrong elites. And then they look for substitute religions. For Karl Menger, he realized, okay, I'm only interested in reality, but it suddenly gets very ideological. And so he counteracted to what's called German idealism. And that's a philosophical trend. So the German culture was very highly developed culture. You had very bright people, but a lot of them academics in a kind of bubble situation with a lot of pride in their intellect. And then they came up with these big ideas. And you see it in Hegel, you see it obviously, it's a kind of ersatz substitute religion that he's offering. So just this striving to understand reality led Karl Menger into a clash with the historical school, which was basically German idealism expressed. As he said, oh, there is no theory, reason can't tell you anything, because there's no economics, there's no human beings, there is like Jewish economics, and there's German economics, and there's British economics, and you have to find it in the blood and the soil, the kind of, and there are no laws, so it's a kind of romantic reaction against reason, but it's actually, it was a reaction against the abuse of reason, and that, like figuring out what reason can do and what it can't do. That I think was the context then where a lot of the early discourse happened in the Austrian school. And I think the peak of the Austrian school was the Mises Circle, which is really a private circle outside of academia, where just Mises invited the brightest people of his time. And it was not just economists, and that's the interesting thing. So it was very interdisciplinary of various fields, and it was practitioners. You had entrepreneurs, you had bankers. And you would expect that they discuss the daily politics or the ins and outs of business, but no, they discussed mainly epistemology, like the most abstract layer, because all about who can you trust, how can you know anything, what's reality like, and that's what these bright people were discussing from various angles and different angles.
It's more like philosophical questions.
It seemed very philosophical, but Mises was a very down-to-earth person as well, like Karl Menger. So he said, I'm not claiming anything about metaphysics. So that's for the philosophers. I'm not a philosopher. I'm interested in reality and in real human beings. But in order to get there, we need to understand something about reality and about the role of human beings in reality. And then you have all these disagreeing epistemologies. It's like, where does the knowledge come from? Is it like an elite knowledge of an expert class? What kind of observation? Is it only observation, but who's observing and based on which rules? All these questions we are facing in our society. Like, what science? What's the scientific consensus? What does data tell you? What is the right theory? All these questions emerged at the same time in a similar setting, and everyone felt, oh my God, we're heading towards a big crisis, because if you don't have this confidence level and you start to think about, oh, he's disagreeing, but because he has a different interest, and that's what Mises called the polylogism. So I'm saying, oh, you don't have the right reason because you are a different class. Like, you're probably a Bitcoiner, and I know Bitcoiners are like that, or you're a leftist or a rightist or something like that. So we don't have the same reason that we share, and then it's just power struggles.
we can see a lot of
that was the
today.
terrible realization by Mises. And unfortunately, Menger became very gloomy. So he was this down-to-earth realist, but very pessimistic, and turned out to be right for the short term of his local surroundings, what would happen to it. And he was quite a prophet, and his major students turned out to be quite prophetic about what would happen in Europe. And so the Austrian school started, I'd say, as a school describing the decline of civilization.
Okay, sounds gloomy, but there was a lot of turbulent times during that time. Knut, do you want to react on that?
Yeah, I'd like to promote my favorite Austrian economics book. Next.
Not the Bitcoin Standard?
I consider Bitcoin Standard, well, Principles of Economics is great as well, and your books as well, Rahim. Austrian Economics for Investors is superb, very well written. But another great book called Economic Science and the Austrian Method by Hans Hermann Hoppe. And this book goes into a lot of epistemology. And one of my favorite passages from it is where he explains empiricism and its foundational flaw, that the empiricist or the trust the science guy says that we cannot know anything to 100% certainty, because all we can do is present a hypothesis, test it, measure the results, and improve on that and get closer to the truth. But Hoppe points out that this statement in itself is an absolutist statement. If we say that we cannot know anything to 100% certainty, then how the fuck do we know that to 100% certainty? So it's oxymoronic, and this is where first principles comes in. And this is how Hoppe explains beautifully how Mises was a deep philosophical thinker, really, in bridging the gap between the objective reality and subjective valuation. So action, human action, is what bridges the two worlds. Like, our thoughts literally shape reality because we change reality through our actions, and vice versa. The reality we live in, the constraints of it, shapes our thoughts and our will, and our action is the bridge between the two worlds. So I think this is very beautiful.
I mean, this is not only a historic panel, but a philosophical panel. I love it. I'm enjoying it. Saif, let's go to you. Libertarian ideas or Austrian economic ideas are very different to the Marxist ideas. They're super on a different levels and scales. Why is it that hard for audiences today to grasp the idea of Austrian economy? Because here we are in the bubble, right? Like, we get it, but this amount of interest we will not get on family dinners during Christmas time, right? So why is it so hard for regular people to grasp these revolutionary ideas?
I think the blame there lies with education, too much education. People are spending too much time at universities, unfortunately, not enough time in the real world. Ultimately, I think it's, the basics of Austrian economics, the idea that it is human action that shapes the world, I think is almost, it can appear to be trivial in its simplicity, but it's deeply profound. And the reason that people don't see the profundity of it, I think, is because education in general is fixated on collectivist ideas. It's shaped by collectivist ideas. And so whether it's nationalism or class or the religion, there are always these collectivist nouns, and the social scientist wants to ascribe agency to these collectivist nouns. So it's the religion that acts, it's the nation that acts, it's the class that acts. It's the working class versus the ruling class versus the capitalist class, or it's the Protestants versus the Catholics. There are always these collectivist ideas, and the very profound insight of the Austrian school is that it is ultimately individuals who act, because it is individuals who perceive the world, it's individuals who are the analytical unit. And so my case would be that it's simply far more accurate to understand reality as the outcome of the actions of individuals, because it's individuals who decide what to do, it's individuals who think, and then reality is shaped by them. And all of that comes ultimately from people's subjective valuations of reality. Ultimately, nothing has value. There is no economics, there is no trade, there is nothing unless people see value. And my favorite example of that is oil. Oil used to be something that was essentially considered the scum of the earth. It was something that you had to remove from your earth if you wanted to grow food on it, if you had a plot of land. If you wanted to grow food, if you wanted to build on the land, you had to remove the oil. So it had negative value. But then humans figured out the idea in their mind that you could burn this and make engines do work. And then they started doing it, and that made oil valuable. And then oil became valuable. Then it went from having negative value to having positive value, even though chemically it remained the same. So what has changed here is human perception, human subjective valuation, and human action. It is what is changing things, even though the oil is still the same. So if you're able to understand this, I think it's a far more powerful way of analyzing the world, because ultimately everything is subjective. Everything is dependent on people's valuation. We could all be living in a world in which we see oil and we think of it as being negative, but then something switches in our brains first, where we figure out what we can do with this, and suddenly it becomes a positive economic good with positive economic value, which we use for very valuable things.
Perfect, and I agree with that. It's a beautiful example that you brought in. During the time that you were studying Austrian economics, you spent hours and countless readings to really get into the ideas of the fathers of Austrian economics. Was there something that you didn't agree with, or that took you more time to grasp some ideas? Rahim, let's start with you.
Well, there's obviously always disagreement. But the thing is that for most people, knowledge isn't really that important because we are seeking ideas usually to legitimize our interests, and everyone does that. If you really long for knowledge, then you seek disagreement, and then it's not like, oh, there once I disagreed. It's like, why did I agree that much? Like, was it boring, or because I want to learn something? So, and if everyone agrees, I try to disagree. And that was also the original approach of the Austrian school was quite different. And this is like two hearts in my breast. I not only was lucky to be taught by the last remaining economists in that tradition, I also was lucky to meet in Vienna when I was much younger, and it was still a more vibrant place than it is now. Some of the last old professors of the other disciplines that were always surrounding it, as one Viennese School of Economics. There are 3 Viennese schools of psychology. There's a Viennese School of art history and so on. And physics, of course, we had a lot of modern physics emerged out of there. So there were a lot of interesting intellectual traditions with very different angles of the world. And a lot of disagreement and a lot of contradictory ideas. And for me, the approach was always this different. So Menger tried to be value neutral, and I try to do that, even though it slows me down and it's really hard to digest. It doesn't give you simple answers. It's a very different way of doing it. I'm very grateful how the Austrian school has survived in the US. But of course, it changed a bit the shape of it. And then most of the conflicts that we see are actually conflicts about society, how we should run society, so it's politics. So a lot of the real fighting is not like really that Mises and Hayek is a theoretical academic. There are theoretical academic disagreements, but they're interesting. It's like the people that say, oh, I'm a Hayekian, or not a Misesian, or the other way, and usually it's about tactics. It's about, you got to reach the gatekeepers in academia, so you're not going for the less credible scientist, you go for the Nobel laureate. Hayek, like that could be a tactic thing. So he must be the superior one. And it's usually all about these kind of conflicts where you really see, oh wow, that's a stark conflict, why it's getting passionate.
But at the core, they agree a lot.
Yeah. I mean, most people don't really care that much about the idea because you can't be absolutely certain. You seek out disagreement. You have disagreements in your head all the time. When it's like something on the podium and it's public, disagreement usually is about politics. It's like, how should we go about? And it's not all bad because it's really about fundamental questions, how to run society, how to change society, and the tactics that you choose there make a lot of difference. Like, do you want to be the serious academic that wants to change from within? Do you do a parallel structure and like oppose it or ridicule even the people that are in power and charge? What is the time that you decide that the institutions have already failed and we've got to build something else? Or you think, oh no, that's still like functional and you could have the right people. and then you used it or use it not. We had the same thing in religion, like trying to figure out, do you need to like set up a new one, or do you use everything that's there and that's a lot and use all the leverage? And that's a big disagreement because you can't be sure. I mean, it's a tactical, strategic question. You can't be wrong about that. So I think these kind of conflicts are natural, and the real interest,
And healthy in the end.
the real interest. I mean, school comes from it's not a place. School comes from a word, schola, which means leisure.
Yeah.
If you have leisure enough to think about real things and not care about the conflicts, then is where it starts. You don't have something to sell because you need to sell it. You're not shilling something. You are not tied to some interest. It's not your career that's at risk because maybe you have fuck you money. And
ideally, thanks to
it's a
Bitcoin,
part of leisure.
we're going to have more
leisure. That was the same thing in Austria. I mean, in Austria, that these bright people could gather together in a seminar and discuss epistemology, like entrepreneurs, because they had fuck you money, and it was like, okay, we have the leisure, now we have time to think about the world. We are not in a structure, and that's also how the Scottish Enlightenment started. It was all these tobacco merchants that started sitting at home and organizing all the
Let's
businesses.
also hear,
And they
I
didn't
see
go
that you're
on the
passionate,
ships
Rahim.
anymore.
I think you're super passionate about it. Give an applause to Rahim. I want to give time to Knut and Saif to react on this as well, and maybe build up on Rahim's ideas of if there is something that you disagreed with over time, something maybe that clicked later on, maybe something that would help the audience see the Austrian economics and the history from a different angle.
Yeah. First of all, like us sitting here having fuck you money, discussing epistemology, there's something to that, right?
That's a beautiful leisure to have.
Yeah. Anyway, when I first read Saif's book, he's bashing Milton Friedman a lot, and I thought, like, why is he bashing Friedman so much? Like, I like Friedman's, pen analogy and all of it. The Free to Choose series is great from the 70s, but there's a similar story with Hayek and the Cato Institute and them trying to these people trying to connect with politicians and get diplomacy points in political circles. They choose to promote the less controversial Austrian economist, which was Hayek rather than Rothbard. And I think these incentives to like skew to score points with the current leaders is like now now I totally agree with all the bashing Friedman points, because like I went full Rothbard. Like it's it's only when you realize that we don't need the state at all that you really get it, because it's so simple. Like humans have two ways of resolving conflict. The only reason we have conflict is over scarce resources. We have two means to resolve them, and one is communication and one is violence. And this is what where Hoppe's argumentation ethics comes in, which I think is the most underrated idea of the last century, really. Because if I argue with someone, by the very act of arguing, I have shown through my action that I think communication is a better way to resolve conflict than aggression. So if you argue with a taxman and the taxman still takes your money, even though you came to an agreement sooner or later that taking money is wrong, then he's not an arguer anymore. He's not in the debate. He's a bully, and he's taking your stuff. So I think there's a lot of skewed thoughts about Austrian economics, or who is and who is not an Austrian economist, because of this political influences on who we choose to promote. And I think Hayek was promoted for other reasons than that he was actually onto something.
Yeah, I would agree. I think Hayek was he was very smart diplomatically in that after World War II, you look at his work from the 1940s until the 1970s, he practically didn't discuss monetary economics. And then he wins the Nobel Prize, and the next day, almost, he writes the denationalization of money. Hey, guys, what if we take the central bank out of the government's hand and have a free market monetary system? So I think there was something diplomatic about it. I don't think the timing was coincidental. He was trying to get ideas of freedom into the mainstream, and he knew that if he took on central banking, that his career would be over. He would be completely marginalized, which is what happened to Mises. Mises moved to New York and was an adjunct faculty at NYU, who had one small seminar, almost became completely obscure. Hayek didn't do that. He became very famous. And, credit to him, it helped promote the ideas of Austrian economics. It's why a lot of us initially took him seriously because, oh, he's got a Nobel Prize back when, we used to respect those things and think that they meant anything. So you read him and then you take the pill and then you go down the path and you go to Rothbard and Mises and then you end up thinking the Nobel Prize is a scam, and then you start thinking Hayek is a socialist. But but we still thank him. When people say that we don't have open-mindedness, it's not true. We like socialists like Hayek, so we can accept their ideas. But in terms of so this is maybe the kind of the largest kind of disagreement within the Austrian school. On a personal level, I'd say I'm much closer to the Rothbard-Hoppe branch than the Hayek branch in my understanding. But if I were to find a disagreement with that, in Principles of Economics, I essentially try and summarize the ideas of Mises, Rothbard, Hoppe into one digestible format that people can read today. Generally, I stick to their ideas. If there's one thing that I introduce that is different, which is my treatment of the topic of interest, where I built on their understanding of interest, as in, the Austrian explanation of interest is unique within schools of economics in that it views interest rates as being a result of time preference. It's called the time preference theory of interest. And so this is the Austrian contribution to explain interest. And it explains why interest is predominant and why trying to ban interest, as many religious and political authorities have tried to do over time, is likely to be counterproductive. It's like trying to impose prices on anything. It's like trying to make something free when it's scarce. It's like trying to impose a minimum price or a maximum price on something. So I agree with all of that, but I would take it a step further and say that as civilization advances, as people accumulate more savings, especially if they have hard money, what would happen is that their time preference drops, and eventually time preference drops to a point where the cost of carrying capital is higher than the time preference implied interest rate. So therefore, holding money costs you, let's say, 1% every year. But if your time preference drops to the point where the interest rate that you would accept is less than 1%, then you would be happy to lend your money out at 0%. So effectively, I've used the Austrian argument for interest to explain why interest could disappear, and also explain the case against interest as being essentially a religious edict against high time preference, because interest is just a manifestation of time preference being too high, effectively.
Perfect. The time is something that is scarce, and we are running out of it. We have the last 4 minutes, guys. So let's try to wrap up a couple of things. For our audience, again, we have a bunch of people here. Christmas are coming. You're gonna have discussions with your families at the dinner. So what are a couple of questions that our audience can kind of ponder upon while showering, driving home, that are kind of hard to grasp, need some more time of thinking to get deeper into Austrian economics, to maybe grasp some concepts that are harder? What would you advise us to think about when we get back? So as Rahim said, we'll have some leisure time and we can be thinking about those questions. What are the few of those?
I'd go with the same question that my favorite. Why should the money supply increase? Just ask that and then let their imagination run wild and logically analyze every single response they give you. Okay, well then prices would drop. Okay, why is that a bad thing? Would it be bad if houses became cheaper? Would it be bad if people could afford more houses? Would it be bad if people could afford more food every year? They'll tell you, well, but then people won't spend money. Ask them. Or, well, your computer gets cheaper every year, and yet here you are, you own a computer, you own a phone. Phones today are a lot cheaper than they were 10 years ago. Yet 10 years ago you had a phone, and today the phone is a lot more expensive than it will be 10 years from now. And yet today you bought the phone. So people don't just buy things because their money is dropping in value. You can have so much fun with this. So make it your Christmas game.
Beautiful. That could be a lovely family dinner during Christmas. Rahim, what would be your question that you would leave us with to either ask our family or ponder upon?
I don't think I have a good answer. I'm pondering too many questions, and usually my advice is not to ponder too much on questions, certainly not at a family dinner. So I'm a very pragmatic, down-to-earth person here as well. I avoid to be a missionary where it doesn't do much good. So be the kind of person that someone would ask because he expects that you won't give a selfish answer by selling something, but you actually care about the person and you will answer according to their needs and their questions and their challenges. And I think that's the praxeological approach, like go from the reality and your real opportunity cost, not from the high ideas, because usually they are distraction, like pondering these high ideas. It's a niche interest. I love it. I do it all the time. But it wouldn't be my advice for a family dinner.
I mean, that's a good one as well. Being compassionate, listening to people as well, and
Yes.
enjoying Christmas dinner as a Christmas
Yes.
dinner. Okay, Knut, what is your advice?
Yeah, I'd like to ask the two questions, and these are also posted in Bitcoin, the Inverse of Clown World, my latest book. When humans practice doing things, do they usually get better or worse at the thing they're practicing? Better, right? The follow-up question that everyone should ask themselves is, so why aren't all prices falling forever? And if you denominate in Bitcoin, they are. So if you put on the Bitcoin goggles, you see the world for what it really is.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Thank you. I just saw a 21 seconds to go to end this. So one more time, please give it up for Knut Svanholm. Give it up for Rahim Taghizadegan and Saifedean Ammous.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, gentlemen. Happy birthday, Jens Knut. I didn't know it was your birthday, man.